Let's move on now to some basic animation using our stick figure. So what we're going to do in this lesson is just look at the basic side view walk cycle and run cycle, just to get used to getting this character moving, and then we can progress from there into some more kind of action sequences. So what I've got here on the stage, as you can see, I've got some walk poses, and these are keyframes. So it's quite important to learn these kind of things before you start animating. So with a walk cycle, it's a good idea to learn the key poses, just when you start creating the animation you're not getting confused and coming up with poses that might be awkward and so on. So it's a good idea to study this from books, real life and so on. So what I've got here is just the poses broken down as simple as possible. So if we zoom in just to check these out. Okay, so what we've got, the first pose is the character in a full stride position. So we've got the legs apart and the arms swinging side by side. And what I've done here, I've drawn the body and the head in blue, and the right side is in green and the left side is in red. So this just gives us, while we explain things, just makes it easier to understand. So what we've got here on the right side, the right leg is forward, so the right arm is in the backward position. So both sides, each limb works in the opposite direction. So if the right leg is pushing forward, the right arm will be back, and vice versa, just to create this momentum and pendulum effect. If both the arm and the leg were going forward or backward together, you'd have a pretty odd walk there. So this is the first thing to bear in mind when you start looking at the walk cycles. Make sure that you've got the arms and the legs working in the correct positions. So that's the first pose, and also you lose a little bit of height there where you've got the legs just apart, not too much. It just kind of brings the height down on the torso. Okay, so moving on to the next pose, we've got the right leg in the middle position. So this leg is now holding the weight of the body, so the foot is kind of central beneath the spine, and the left leg is coming forward in the bent position, getting ready to drive forward, and the arms are in a kind of passing pose. They're almost down by the side of the body, and they're about to pass each other to go into an opposite direction. And here you gain the height where the right leg is not completely straight, it's a little bit bent, but it's kind of brought up the height of the figure a little bit. Moving on to the next pose, we've got exactly the same pose as the first one, but everything is working in the opposite direction. So instead of the right leg forward, we've now got the left leg forward, and same with the arms, vice versa, as opposed to the first pose. And remember that the height comes down just very slightly. And then the final pose is exactly the same as number 2, but in the opposite position. So now we've got the weight being held on the left leg, and the right leg is coming forward, and the arms are now both down by the side in the passing position. So these are our keyframes that we can work to. So what we're going to do is grab our stickman figure that's all rigged up, and we're going to start posing this out on top of these drawings here. Okay, so if I show you what I've got here with regards to layers, what I've done, I've got the character twice here because we're going to create a walk cycle first and then a run cycle. So I'm just going to turn one of these off. I'm going to bring the timeline out to say around 100 frames, just to give us plenty of space there to animate. And what we've got, the walk pose layer is the key drawings we got there. Ground, this refers to just this black line here, just to give us a little bit of a guide to work by for the feet. And background, this just literally is just the white background. All I've done here is, because in Animate you get a grey background, I just thought it would be easier to put in just a white rectangle at the back there, just so we make things a little bit cleaner to look at on the screen here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is expose all these drawings out. At the moment we've just got them on one frame, so if we come out to say frame 10, everything disappears thereafter. So we need to expose these for longer. So all we're going to do is just strike through all of these to around frame 100, just come down like this, and I'm just simply going to hit F5 on the keyboard, and this will expose everything here. On the peg you won't see a grey bar come out here, because what you've got is the character is held within the peg there. So if you open that up, then you'll see this extends outwards. So let's close this up again, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to lock the background layer, the ground layer, the run poses, and the other character that we've turned the visibility off of. So all we can do at the moment is just select either the character or the walk pose layer. So what we're going to do first is put this character in this first pose here, and what we need are the animation controls on. So we've got the icon here, the animate button, the character in the yellow circle there. Make sure this is switched on. What we're going to do for this first pose is just use the transform tool, which is beneath. So we switch this on. So remember to use this for animation and not this tool at the top, the select tool. All the animation tools are below this horizontal line here. So we're going to use the transform tool. So we're on frame 1. What I'm going to do is just have the whole thing selected, and we're just literally going to, using the arrow keys, just bring this character over until we're kind of on top of our first key pose. I'm just going to zoom in. Well, I'm just going to momentarily lock down the walk poses so I can just select the character. Okay, so what we've got here is we want to map this character out into this position. So let's say this is the right arm and the right leg, and this is the left. So what we're going to do is, just using the transform tool, is just kind of pose it out and mimic what we've got going on. Obviously it's not going to be an exact fit because the characters I've drawn are going to be different in proportion to the character we've got on the stage here. So as long we're just using them as a guideline. Okay, this foot here, it's obviously in the wrong direction, so all I need to do is just select it and switch it around like so. And these arms I'm just going to bring down into these positions here. Okay, so this is our first pose. We may need to go in and tweak it a little bit when we bring it down to the ground here, because at the moment we're obviously floating up in the air here. So what we're going to do is bring this down shortly. And now we're going to move on to the second key pose. What I'm going to do, just quickly lock the character, and I'm going to unlock the walk pose layer, and I'm literally going to now come to frame 10, and I'm just going to scooch this over so the second keyframe is in line with our first key pose here. And now we're going to pose this character out. So lock down the walk poses, unlock the peg, make sure you go to a new frame and you're not going to start changing frame 1. So I've come up to frame 10, and what we're going to do is just start moving this around now. So again, for this pose I'll just use the transform tool. So these arms, they're literally in the passing pose now, so I'm just going to bring this left one down a short way and the right one to about there, and this leg is now going to be underneath the body holding the weight. So let's bring this down. So again, we may need to tweak as we go. You can always come back and change things. This foot needs to be level, and this leg is going to be around here. Again, doesn't have to be exact. Remember, the drawing beneath is slightly different size. So what we have now is 2 key poses. So let's turn off the guide for the moment. So this is our first pose, and this is our second, and if we scrub through the timeline, we'll see that the program has in-betweened it for us. So it's created all those joins in between which are held in these cells here. So if we open up the peg, you'll see the tween arrows there. Okay, so that's the first key pose tweened into the second, and now what we're going to do is go in and create the third. So we're going to come to frame 20 for this. So let's open up the walk pose. And to unlock the walk poses, quickly lock down the character. Frame 20, I'm going to bring this along and move it beneath the character here. And we're just going to pose this out now, and we just need to be careful that we're moving the correct arms and legs into position, because you don't want these arms to go back where they came from. You want them to swing past, so you know, make sure we're selecting the correct ones. So let's lock down the reference, unlock the peg, make sure you're on the new frame. Now this is the arm that was in the back position. This is now going to be covering this green arm here, so we're just going to push this forward, and this arm we're going to move back. Now if you can only see and select a bit of the arm, obviously we can only move that piece. What you can do is select that piece, press B for banana on the keyboard, and this will go up to the next available piece. So what we've done, we've selected the whole arm there. Now we can move this back. Okay, so now this leg in the straight position is the one that's going to be back here. So let's go something like this, and this leg will be out straight. So I'm going to bring this down a touch, point the toes up. Let's bring this back a bit more. Okay, so that's 3 poses now. So let's turn off the walk pose guide here, and let's just scrub through what we have so far. There you go. So we've got the legs passing, then going in the opposite direction, and the arms are doing the same. Okay, so that's 3 key poses we have now, so we just need to go in and complete the 4th one. So let's lock down the character, bring back the walk poses, unlock that. I'm going to come to frame 30, and we're just going to nudge this in line here, so just so we've got that guide there. Lock this and unlock the character. And now let's start to pose this one out, and what we're going to do is turn on the IK system for this. So while we've got the whole character selected, if we click the IK button, we can see all of our points here that we can rotate from. At the moment, for example, if I grab this wrist here, you'll see the arm moving there, but I can move the entire body as a result. So if we want to position this arm here, if I want to position this here, we can do it carefully, but sometimes you've got the possibility of yanking the entire body by mistake. So what you can do is, at the top of the hierarchy, you can actually click that point there, shift click it, it will turn red, and what it's done, it's locked anything above this hierarchy now. So if you grab this wrist, no matter where you pull it, the rest of the body is going to stay stationary. So that's a good little rule of thumb for if you're going to be moving the arms and legs, and you don't want everything to just be like a rag doll and pulling all over the place. So what we could do here is literally bring this down into position. You'll see there you can have a slight movement in the wrist there. Okay, and something like that, and you can always go in and fine tune. So say this hand here, if we want to move this back into position, we just need to select the tool here and we can individually select this and just fine tune it. Okay, so let's grab this again, and remember this is still locked, so to unlock it just shift click it again. And what we can do here again with the legs, you know, at the moment we're moving everything. If we come to the top here and shift select the connecting point there, you have to make sure you're selecting the correct one. I think that's the hip, the torso point there. So let's go in a bit closer. So let's try this one. So that's this leg. So you just have to make sure you go in and select the correct point there. So where I've got about 3 points in the same area, you just need to make sure you select the correct one there. Okay, so this will be the leg in the back position is going to come forward now. So what you can do is just come in something like that. And I'm going to just fine tune the foot this way. Let's go back into the IK, let's unlock this and zoom in. Okay, so you'll find with the IK it's more of an assistance tool than a full solution for animating your parts. So you know, if you're going to be animating things like maybe a chain swinging and things like that, the IK system is perfect for something like that, because you can get the true movement of a chain swinging using the IK, because you've rigged everything up like chain link to the next chain link. You'll get a true flow if you use the IK system as opposed to the transform tool here. But what I'm doing here is just showing you little ways you can move bits and pieces in the IK here especially. It's important to point out that you can lock these points by shift selecting. So here, for example, if I want to lock the top part of this arm, I can just shift select at the elbow, and now all that will happen is this. So that's a good little tip if you've got like a little, you know, cluster of body parts here and you need to isolate anything. Just shift select these points, they'll go red, and then you'll be able to animate using the IK anything below that point there. Okay, so let's check we have all the key poses. So let's just going to zoom out quickly, turn off the walk pose, and let's quickly scrub through. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's everything posed out, but you'll see we've got some things going on like the character floating and so on, so we need to fine tune this now. Okay, so let's go to the first key pose here, and you just need to make sure you're selecting the correct frame. So this keyframe here is the first pose, and you'll get this bounding box around if you're using the transform tool. And what we want to do is bring this down onto the ground plane here, so somewhere around there is fine. And this leg, I'm just going to bring this up. So this is just where we're going to start playing around a little bit. Now the next pose, the next keyframe at frame 10, we need to bring this up because we've created a tween beforehand where we lowered the first one. We need to move the second one up now, so somewhere around there. Onto the third one, we bring this one down. Okay, so this leg, let's change the position slightly, and the final one here we just need to bring up somewhere around there. So now if we scrub through, we've got him walking along the ground, and you can see here the position here where the legs are apart, he loses the height. So if I line this head up with the top of the menu bar here, you'll see a bit of the head disappear as he gains height here into the next pose. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and Animate has put in all the in-betweens. So in all these cells in between, these are all kind of like the separate drawings that have been in between for us, between the key poses. Okay. So now what I want to point out is something that could be obvious here when you look at the ground plane and the feet. If we scroll through slowly, you'll see here we've got a slight dip with the feet going beneath that line. Now that's not too much of a problem, especially if you're not going to have any kind of ground plane visible. But if you are using something like this on a scenery, what we can do is just go in and slightly tweak the feet to work a bit better along this line. So all we need to do is, for instance, this first frame, this key pose, what we can do in the in the frame afterwards, we can move this foot into a new position. So if we watch this foot here between the two key poses, you'll see that the heel kind of dips beneath that line there. So what we can do in the second frame, using the transform tool, we could just bring this down somewhere like this. So I've created a new keyframe in frame 2. So we've got this foot kind of snapping down here, and it's still going beneath, but it's not as pronounced as the angle before. So we can come back and work on this a bit more, and from here you'll see that the toes are dipping beneath. So what we can do in the frame after the keyframe, actually this frame before the next key pose, the third one, what we can do is tilt this to around here. There you go, so it's not so obvious. So maybe we can just start to pull this out frame by frame, and again this foot here I'm just going to straighten out a bit. There we go. So it's just little tweaks on the feet there. Remember also that as this character's walking in real time, you're not really going to notice so much something like that, so you can kind of cheat it a little bit. So what we'll do, we'll just work with this leg a bit more and try and bring this up a bit. So it's kind of in the first 8 frames or so. We're getting this just beneath there. Okay, let's check. Just as we go along. I mean, you can just come into any frame and just start to tweak these feet as you go along, just so you can get them in a better position there. So this first pose, I just want to bring down slightly there, just so we're on the line. Another thing we can kind of mention here is that in reality the right side, which is the one closest to us, the foot would be a bit lower, the left side would be a bit higher, so it might be more here if we're looking at perspective, because it would be a bit smaller. But seeing as we're working with kind of a very two-dimensional character, a stick man, you know, we can make everything very flat. So the choice is yours if you want to make the nearer side lower and the far side a little bit higher off the mark. But as I say, by the time you're animating this through in real time, you're not going to notice what's happening there so much. So I'm just going to bring this timeline down just to the end of the animation. I just want to hit enter just to play this through. Okay, let's play again. Okay, so I just want to bring this leg up. So what we can actually do is we could select the entire leg and we could start to nudge things around. Okay. Okay, I think that's fine. Let's play this through. Okay, that's better. So remember, you can always, you've got a bit of room there to move things around slightly. You can always move them back in as best as you can, as long as you're not nudging things around too crazy. You won't lose the rig or the you know, the kind of strength of the character there. So this is the 4 key poses all posed out. So what will happen when we get to this point is that we need a cycle to go from this point to the first key pose to create the cycle. So let's bring ourselves back out to 100, and what we're going to do is now paste the first frame at around frame 40 here, just so we can have this final key pose go back to the original pose there. And all I'm going to do is select the first one, copy, which is Control C, then go to frame 40, Control V. So now we've got the final pose moving into the first, and then if we cycle this, it'll go from here and through again. So we've created the entire cycle. But what we need to do at the moment, if we cycle this, what we've got, the very first keyframe and the very last keyframe of the cycle are absolutely identical. So I'm flipping between the two here, and you can see there's no change in the position there. What we need to do, where we've just pasted the original key pose at the end here, we need to go to the frame just before it and hit F6, and then the frame after and all the way after that runs up to 100 we just want to delete. So just select it all and delete. And now what you'll have within the cycle, this is the first key pose. When we get to the end, we have this, and then if we cycle, it'll go to this. So we've got a continuous cycle there, so we won't have a pause for 2 frames of the same pose, which will be very noticeable when you play it back. So we need to create this little frame here. Okay, so what we're going to do is let's copy and paste this. So we've got a cycle going around twice. So I'm just going to select everything here. Oops. So Control C, go to frame 40, Control V, and I'm going to bring the timeline back to the end of there, which is frame 70. about 79 I think, 78. And what we'll do, let's press play, and this will cycle through twice on the spot. There you go, let's play that again. So that's speed wise, that's a pretty good speed of walk, so we've got a nice brisk pace there. What you could do is make it shorter if you wanted it, you know, to kind of keyframe every 8 frames or something like that, or move these around a little, extend them more and so on. So that's the side view walk cycle. So at the moment it's stationary, so what you could do here is have the character kind of where it is on the stage, and you could have another layer with background moving past the character, so maybe buildings here, like a kind of outline scrolling past the character while he's standing on the spot. Or we could have the character move from one side of the scene to the next. So what we could do there is, this character at the moment is contained within a peg. What we could do is attach him to another peg. So if we select this peg, go to the plus sign here, select peg, and now all we need to do is, I'm just going to keyframe there, and I'm going to come to frame 78. I'm just going to move this, say around there. Okay, so we've now created 2 keyframes in different positions, so it starts here and ends here. So let's play through, and you'll see the character moving along there. What you'll sometimes find is that the character will move too fast across the scene, which means you've probably done too short a distance or too great a distance. Let's move this out and see what happens when we come to the start here. So you see here, that's a bit too fast. He's kind of moonwalking forwards there. So what you'd want to do is shorten the distance. So something like that's about right. And if it's too short, then he could kind of be walking very slowly in increments. So you just need to get this right with the peg you've just attached, get it moving across there. So let's play this again. So I'm quite happy with that. I mean, you could do other things, like adding slight movement to the wrists here, or a slight nod backwards and forwards with the head. You know, that's things you can go in and play with. But this is the basics of a side view walk cycle for this stick man. So this file's included in with the package, so you can pull this apart and practice yourself. Okay, so what we're going to do now is move on to the side run cycle, so we can now have this character running along within a scene. Okay, so let's lock this layer down and turn it off. Beneath this layer I have this character in the beginning state again, where we can start to pose it out. I'm just going to turn it off for a second, and just beneath there we have a run pose layer. So we've got some new keyframes here, so let's have a quick look at these. So there are 6 keyframes here. They're similar to the walk cycle, but just a bit more extreme with the way that the legs are positioned and so on. It's a bit more dynamic, and we've got an extra pose in there. So this first pose is a bit like the walk cycle in the full stride position. So you've got the right leg forward with heel touching the ground. In this case the left leg is up and fully bent, and you've got the arms working in the opposite direction. So you've got the right arm back, the right leg forward. Then the next pose, we've got the body in the passing position. So you've got the weight over the right foot, you've got the left leg ready to come forward, and the arms are just about to pass each other in the middle. Then the next pose, we've got the body pushing off of the ground, so it's projecting the weight of the body off of the ground. So we're off the ground a little bit here, and then what we do, we come to this next pose, which is the same as pose 1 but in the opposite direction. So you've now got the left heel in contact with the ground and the right leg up in the air, and then we get the next passing pose, which is the same as pose 2 but in the opposite direction, and the next pose we have the body pushing off of the left toe. So you've kind of got, you can break this down into 3 poses. So you've got 1, 2, 3, then it repeats but in the opposite direction. So in the second half of this cycle, you've got the left leg forward to start with. So what we're going to do is start to pose our character out as we did with the walk cycle into these positions. So what I'm going to do is bring in this peg, and seeing as this is a run cycle, we don't want so many frames in between the key frames. So whereas before we went every 10 frames for a keyframe, we'll probably go to say around every 5, something like that. So this first one, let's go in and pose this through. First thing I'm going to do is select the body, and I'm going to tilt it forward just because with the run the body seems to be pushing forward and leaning forward a bit more. So that's the first thing we'll do. So this can be the right arm. We're just going to quickly go through and pose these out. Again, the drawings are there for reference to learn the key poses, so they're not going to be the exact same size as the stick man. It's just there for reference. Okay, let's just bring this forward just a little bit. This can be the left leg, and of course we need to move this round. And we need to bring the body down. This heel will be in contact with the ground, so let's select the whole thing and need to nudge down a bit. So around there. Okay, so let's unlock the run poses. We want to go 5 frames along, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And position the second keyframe beneath the character, and remember to pose out at the same frame here. You don't want to go over your first keyframe and wipe that out. What we're going to do here is bring the body down just a bit more, because in the first key pose this leg is almost straight, so you gained a bit of height. This one you've kind of got the weight hunkered down over the right knee here. So let's bring this back. Maybe somewhere around there. And this arm is starting to come forward now. And this one back. Somewhere around there. Okay, so 5 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On to the next key pose. So we line this up around here. Let's lock that down. And on the same frame on the character layer, let's move this character up, because this at this point he's actually leaving the ground, but not by too much. You're only going to leave the ground by a small amount here. So this leg, let's bring this back, slight bend, and the toes pointed down. And this leg can be in the kind of extreme opposite position here, something like that. Okay, so this arm will now be forward, and this one back, something like that. Okay, let's turn off the run reference and let's just quickly see what we have here, just scrubbing through. Okay, 5 frames along, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's bring the next pose in. So here we need to bring the body down just a slight amount because the heel will now be in contact with the ground. So this leg will be around here. And this one around here. Okay, the next pose, so we want 5 along. Bring this along, and remember to lower the body just a touch more. Maybe somewhere around there. And we'll bring this maybe to around here. And these arms are starting to pass here. And the final pose, we're leaving the ground slightly here with the opposite foot. So on this frame. Lock this down. Okay, so it'll be this leg. Okay, so remember you could use your IK if you wanted. You could select it, go to the IK chain, and remember if you shift select the top of the arm you can freeze everything else outside of that. Let's unlock that. I'm going to go back to the transform tool just to quickly pose this out so we don't have to zoom in too much. Okay. So this is the left arm. And the right arm is back here more. Okay, so let's turn off the run poses and scrub through, and we should have the 6 key poses in position. So let's go through slowly. So you can see there we've got the bounce, the body's moving up and down as it hits the ground and so on. We can come back and do some work around here, so you see this leg is going beneath that line. We can repeat what we did earlier with the walk cycle and just shuffle things around a little bit. And again, when you have this running, you won't notice too much little bits that go over and so on, the little discrepancies because of the speed of the animation. So let's bring this back just to the end here. I just want to see how fast this is when I hit play. Okay, that seems like a fairly reasonable pace for a run. We don't want it too fast. Literally for the recording of the video here, we don't want it to break up on the screen. Again, this file will be included with a package. You can go in and play around with this yourself, slow it down, speed it up, and so on, and tweak it. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what's happening around here with the feet. So I think here, as I was saying, you can kind of cheat a little bit and move things around, just tidy up as you go along. You know, something like that isn't the end of the world if you're just below that line. See, that kind of works okay. So moving on to the other leg. As it comes down, it's going to go below there. So let's again just shuffle this, bring this down. Okay, that seems to be working reasonably well. You don't want to push the limbs too far that the design starts to break apart. We're lucky with the stick figure in that we've got no seams in clothing, no colour differences, so we can get away with moving things in increments using the transform tool, so we can cheat a little bit with moving things around there. Okay, so let's bring this open. Okay, so what we'd want to do here is create maybe a cycle, you know, if this character's running from one side of the screen to the other. So remember, this last keyframe here needs to go to this keyframe. If we just cycle as it stands at the moment, we're literally going to snap from this to this. We need it to cycle smoothly. So what we're going to do is select the first one, going to Control C to copy. 5 frames later, after the final keyframe, we're going to paste, which is Control V. So now we've got a seamless animation from the final pose back to the first pose. And also remember, the final frame now, where we've pasted this in, is now exactly the same as the first keyframe. So we've got 2 drawings that are the exact same. So if we cycle this, we're going to have an animation that hangs for 2 frames, and we're going to have a very slight pause, and we don't want that. So where we've just pasted this in, go to the frame just before, hit F6 just to keyframe that, and then the keyframe after that we pasted in, just delete it. So remove that, and now what you'll have, the final keyframe is slightly different from the first. So this is the final one, then when it cycles to the first, you'll have that slight transition, so you've got a nice flow there, so it'll be seamless. You won't have an animation that hangs for 2 drawings. So what we could do here, I mean, you could cycle the animation with controls, or you could just come in and copy and paste. So let's just quickly Control C, Control V, let's put another one there, and let's bring this down. And go to the start of the animation, the first keyframe. If we just hit play here, there's a nice run cycle there, so you've got the full bounce and so on. And what you could do, you could even add little things like you know, little flick of the wrists as you run and so on, or little the head bobbing slightly and things like that. So again, what you can do with this cycle, you can have him running on the spot and have a separate layer with background behind him and animate the background past him. So you would animate it this way towards the left, so it appears that he's running past it, but he's on the spot. Or we could attach this to a peg, another peg, and have this running across. So I think what we could do here is, just to demonstrate that, select the entire peg here, the plus sign, attach a peg, okay, and then on that peg, just going to F6 it So we've got a start position, and here let's we may need to change this depending on the speed. So this is where you need to figure out the speed of the run compared to the peg you've attached. So let's hit play. Oh, well, that's worked out pretty good. So you can change the distance of the peg, and it'll appear to be a faster or a slower run. You may need to adjust it if it appears that the character is too static on the spot, or appears to be gliding along, you know, doing a kind of front forward moonwalk. You need to adjust it, but that seems to work out pretty okay there. So let's watch this again. So you could speed that up by removing some frames too. So that's that layer, and remember the one above, we still have the walk cycle too. So if we turn this layer on and go to the start, here we've got the walk cycle. So if we hit play, okay, and this one, go back to the start, have a nice run cycle. Okay, so as I say, this file will be included in with a package, so you can come down, you can take a look through these layers here, check out everything that's going on, and you've even got the run poses and the walk poses. If you want to take a static character and animate it yourself, so you could take the stick man and just pose it out over the reference pictures there, and just try coming up with your own walk and run cycles, and just maybe tweaking it a little bit, seeing what little changes you can add to it and so on. So have a practice with that, and when you're ready, move on to the next lesson. What we're going to be doing is taking a look at some kind of animation exercises and so on with these stick men. So have a go with the walk and run cycles, and once you feel you're ready to move on, just open the next video and we'll get cracking.